The drama surrounding Jim Jones and his relentless pursuit of relevance had been simmering for years, but in the summer of 2025, it erupted into a full-blown spectacle that no one in the hip-hop world could ignore. It wasn't just a clash of egos or a petty rap beef. This was a collision of legacies, a battle between authenticity and artifice that played out in the streets, on social media, and across podcast airwaves. The center of it all was Jim Jones, a Harlem native whose name once carried the weight of gritty street anthems but now seemed to teeter on the edge of caricature. His every move screamed for attention: flashy Instagram posts, designer fits, and bold claims that he was running New York's rap scene. Yet, standing in stark contrast were Jadakiss and Styles P, two titans of the locks, whose legacy was built not on hype but on raw, unfiltered bars and an unshakable bond with the culture. This wasn't just a story of rivalry. It was a reckoning, a moment that forced everyone to question what it truly means to hold weight in hip-hop. Jim Jones had always been a hustler, a man who moved through Harlem's concrete jungle with a swagger that demanded notice. Back in the early 2000s, he was a cornerstone of Dipset, a crew that defined an era with their unapologetic bravado and street-certified anthems. His verses on tracks like We Fly High carried a raw energy that resonated from Harlem's corners to clubs across the country. But somewhere along the way, that authenticity began to blur. The Jim Jones of 2025 was no longer just a rapper. He was a chameleon, shifting personas with dizzying speed. Street general one day, fashion icon the next, businessman the day after that. His Instagram feed was a kaleidoscope of designer outfits, exotic cars, and crypto talk, each post a calculated bid to stay in the spotlight. He wasn't just chasing clout. He was sprinting toward it, leaving no trend untouched. But in his hunger to be everything, he was starting to look like nothing at all. The streets, though, have a long memory and they don't reward reinvention for its own sake. Whispers had been growing louder, questioning whether Jim's grind was still rooted in the block or if it had been traded for a carefully curated image. Tension came to a head during the now infamous VERZUZ battle, a night that would haunt Jim's legacy like a shadow he couldn't shake. The Locks, Jadakiss, Styles P, and Chic Louch stepped onto that stage with a hunger that felt primal, their verses slicing through the air like blades. Jadakiss, in particular, was a force of nature, spitting with a precision and passion that left the crowd roaring and Dipset reeling. Jim and his crew, by contrast, seemed unprepared, almost cavalier, as if they'd rolled in straight from a party. The internet lit up with memes and hot takes, cementing the night as a massacre. Jadakiss didn't just win. He redefined the hierarchy, reminding everyone who the real kings of New York were. But Jim, ever defiant, refused to take the L quietly. In the weeks and months that followed, he doubled down, throwing shade in interviews and on social media, acting as if Dipset's performance was just a casual misstep. He spun narratives, claiming they hadn't taken it seriously, but the fans weren't buying it. The VERZUZ stage wasn't just a platform, it was a crucible, and the Locks had emerged as pure gold while Jim's shine looked more like tarnished brass. Styles P, in a rare moment of bluntness, called it out in an interview, his words cutting deeper than any diss track. "You don't buy street cred," he said, his voice calm but heavy with truth. "You gotta earn that." The line wasn't just a jab. It was a verdict, a public indictment of Jim's entire approach. Everyone knew who he was talking about, and the internet erupted, amplifying the sting. What made the criticism land so hard was the source. Jadakiss and Styles P weren't just rappers, they were institutions. For decades, they built a legacy on bars that hit like scripture, verses that spoke to the soul of the streets. They didn't need to chase trends or flood social media with flexes. Their respect was hard-earned, forged in late-night studio sessions, block ciphers, and a loyalty to the craft that never wavered. When Styles called Jim's energy forced, it wasn't just shade. It was a mirror held up to a man who seemed to have forgotten what made him real. Jim's Harlem roots were undeniable, but somewhere along the way, the grit had been replaced by gloss. The block-certified stamp he once carried was fading, overshadowed by Fashion Week photos and viral stunts that felt more performative than profound. The tension wasn't new, it had been brewing for years, a slow burn fueled by subtle jabs and sideways glances. Jim had always been vocal, never shy about proclaiming his dominance, but his recent claims were bolder, almost reckless. In podcast interviews, he positioned himself above legends like Nas and Pusha T, as if his catalog could stand toe-to-toe with theirs. The audacity was staggering. Nas, a poet whose words reshaped hip-hop, was untouchable, his legacy a monolith. Jim, by comparison, was a hustler with hits, but his discography lacked the depth, the cultural weight to justify such boasts. When Jadakiss caught wind of it, his response was surgical, a slick clapback that didn't even need to name names. "Numbers don't lie," he said, letting the stats and the streets speak for themselves. The internet ate it up, with fans dissecting every word, every bar, every moment that exposed the gap between Jim's hype and reality. P doubled down, his frustration palpable. "If you gotta throw shade to lift yourself up, that's weak energy," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd seen it all. For him and Jadakiss, this wasn't about clout or petty drama. It was about protecting the culture. Hip-hop wasn't just a game, it was a way of life, a code built on authenticity and respect. Jim's constant pivots, from street boss to influencer to self-proclaimed king, felt like a betrayal of that code. His music, once raw and unfiltered, now felt like a side hustle, overshadowed by flashy visuals and hollow flexes. Even his loyal Dipset fans were starting to question him, their comments on X laced with disappointment. "Jim used to be that dude," one wrote, "but now he's just chasing likes." Contrast was stark. While Jim was busy curating his image, Jadakiss and Styles were still in the trenches, dropping verses that hit harder than ever. Styles, now a juice bar owner and wellness advocate, hadn't lost his edge, his bars still carrying the weight of a man who'd lived every word. Jadakiss, cool as ever, let his music do the talking, his recent freestyles sparking frenzies online without a single gimmick. They were the blueprint, proof that realness didn't need a filter. Jim, meanwhile, seemed trapped in a cycle of his own making, chasing relevance in a world that valued clicks over classics. His new tracks, slick with production, lacked the soul that once defined him. The streets noticed, and so did the OGs. This wasn't just a beef, it was a culture clash, a battle between depth and flash, legacy and clout. Jim's talent was undeniable, but talent alone couldn't bridge the gap. The Locks weren't just winning, they were preserving a standard, a reminder that hip-hop's heart lay in bars, not brands. As the dust settled, the question lingered. Could Jim reclaim the authenticity that once defined him, or was he too far gone, lost in a maze of his own hype? The streets were watching, and they weren't known for second chances. What do you think? Has Jim Jones drifted too far from his roots, or is he just playing the game in a new era? Drop your thoughts below, share this with your crew, and hit that like button if you're feeling this breakdown. Subscribe for more real talk because we're just getting started. Stay locked in for the next one.